Welcome back. Today, we enter a world where feminism meets Freud, Lacan, and beyond. This is Psychoanalytic Feminism, a movement that takes the tools of psychoanalysis and turns them toward dismantling patriarchy. First, Hélène Cixous gives us écriture féminine, a writing style that lets the female body speak in language, overflowing with rhythm, emotion, and multiplicity. She urges women to write themselves into existence. Luce Irigaray critiques phallocentrism, the male-centered logic that dominates culture and psychoanalysis. She calls for embracing sexual difference, not erasing it, to open new spaces for feminine subjectivity. Juliet Mitchell bridges psychoanalysis and feminism, showing that Freud's theories, if reinterpreted, can explain how patriarchy is reproduced through family, culture, and the unconscious. Julia Kristeva shifts the focus to the semiotic pre-linguistic, rhythmic bodily expression and the symbolic structured, rule-bound language. For her, the speaking body is never fully captured by grammar or law. Sarah Kofman deconstructs Freud himself, exposing contradictions in his theories about women and questioning the enigma of woman in psychoanalysis. Catherine Clément blends feminism, psychoanalysis, and mythology to explore how cultural stories lock women into archetypes and how they might be rewritten. Now we move into postfeminism, where feminism's successes and contradictions collide. Susan Faludi warns of a media backlash in Backlash 1991, claiming women's progress is under constant cultural attack. Angela McRobbie critiques how neoliberal culture co-opts feminism into consumerism, while Donna Haraway gives us the cyborg manifesto, a vision of feminist technoscience that rejects natural gender binaries altogether. And here come the 21st century offshoots. Ecofeminism linking gender oppression to environmental exploitation, cyberfeminism exploring digital spaces as sites of liberation and control, and xenofeminism, a techno-materialist push for a post-gender future where biology is no longer destiny. Pause here and note this. Psychoanalytic feminism digs into the unconscious, post-feminism dissects culture's contradictions, and techno-feminisms imagine what lies ahead. Let's decode a strand of feminism that dives into the mind itself. Psychoanalytic feminism. This isn't just about laws or pay gaps, it's about the invisible wiring of our unconscious that keeps patriarchy running. It begins with Freud and the Oedipal complex, where femininity gets defined as lack, framed by ideas like penis, envy, and castration anxiety. Second-wave feminists Simone de Beauvoir, Kate Millett, Germaine Greer saw this as sexism in a lab coat. Millett called out Freud for dressing patriarchy as science. But not all stopped at critique. Karen Horney flipped the script with womb envy, saying the real force shaping women's identity wasn't biology, but cultural subordination. Then came Juliet Mitchell's psychoanalysis and feminism. Instead of discarding Freud, she used psychoanalysis as a microscope to see how patriarchy burrows into the psyche. Pause here, Mitchell's insight was key. Psychoanalysis mirrors the distortions of a male-dominated world, and by exposing those distortions, feminism gains a new tool. Her lecture Femininity, Narrative and Psychoanalysis 1972 connected this to literature, showing how repression and subjectivity shape women's voices on the page. Remember psychoanalytic feminism as the movement that doesn't just fight patriarchy in society, but digs it out of the unconscious, using Freud, Lacan, Kristeva and Mitchell as both critics and tools. Let's decode a key feminist psychoanalytic debate, phallocentrism. The story begins with Ernest Jones in 1927 during his exchanges with Freud. Jones saw a problem psychoanalysis was obsessed with the male sexual organ as the symbolic center of everything. He warned male analysts were unduly phallocentric. Fast forward, Jacques Lacan takes the term into his essay, The Signification of the Phallus, 1958 or 65. But here's the twist. Lacan says the phallus isn't a body part at all. It's a signifier, a symbolic position in language that governs desire and entry into the symbolic order. Pause here, this is where Jacques Derrida steps in. He deconstructs Lacan, saying, Nice try, but you've still made the phallus the center of meaning. Derrida's critique exposed how psychoanalysis still privileged a masculine symbolic system. Feminist theorists like Luce Irigaray and Hélène Cixous took this further, calling for a feminine language and identity beyond the logic of the phallus. Remember the flow? Jones coins the term critique of male bias, Lacan redefines it as signifier, Derrida deconstructs it as still male-centered, Irigaray and Cixous imagine language outside the phallic order. Okay, let's meet Hélène Cixous, born 1937, a towering figure in post-structuralist feminist theory alongside Juliet Kristeva and Luce Irigaray. She is deeply influenced by Jacques Derrida, Sigmund Freud and Jacques Lacan, but she turns their theories inside out. Her landmark 1975 essay, The Laugh of the Medusa, is a rallying cry, writing is for you are for you, your body is yours, take it. Here, she introduces écriture féminine, a feminine mode of writing that escapes the rigid masculine logic of traditional language. She calls it white ink, a metaphor for women's bodily knowledge and maternal creativity. Pause and note this. Cixous says patriarchy teaches women to hate their own bodies, what she calls the logic of anti-love. It trains women to love only what they lack, male power, male attributes. Her writing style, poetic, non-linear, intertextual, she blurs the boundaries between male, female, mind, body. For Cixous, literature becomes a revolutionary space where women write their bodies into language, reclaim pleasure, and resist symbolic erasure. Golden exam trick, remember. Écriture féminine equals writing from the body. White ink as metaphor. Breaks binary structures and restores female subjectivity. Let's meet Luce Irigaray, Belgian-born, French psychoanalyst, psycholinguist, and cultural theorist, one of the sharpest critics of the phallocentric foundations of Western thought, influenced by Freud, Lacan, Heidegger, and structuralist theory. She takes them on directly. Her breakthrough text, Speculum of the Other Woman, 1974, and This Sex, Which Is Not One, 1977, expose how philosophers from Plato to Kant have systematically erased or distorted femininity. Pause and note this. She says, women have been constructed as the other, silent, absent, or exchanged like commodities between men. She draws on Claude Lévi-Strauss to explain how, in patriarchal economies, women are traded like signs in a system of male-to-male exchange. Her key concept? Sexual difference. The idea that so-called universal subjectivity is actually masculine. True sexual difference means men and women both achieving subjectivity but not as opposites, rather as distinct modes of being. In The Forgetting of Air in Martin Heidegger, 1999, she even critiques Heidegger for ignoring air, a metaphor for breath, communication, and the maternal. Remember the trick here. Sexual difference, woman as the other, commodification of women, and a rebuilding discourse beyond binary, male-centered logic. Let's talk about Juliet Mitchell, British psychoanalyst, socialist, feminist, and the author of Psychoanalysis and Feminism, 1974. Her mission? To bring together two worlds many thought couldn't mix, Freud's psychoanalysis and feminist theory. While many second-wave feminists like Kate Millett outright rejected Freud as sexist, Mitchell argued something different. Freud didn't create patriarchy, he described it, which means his theories can actually be used to critique the culture that produces gender inequality. Pause and note this. She identified 4 structures that sustain women's oppression: production, reproduction, sexuality, and socialization. Drawing on Lacan, she said castration is symbolic, not biological, but a fantasy formation that shapes rigid gender roles. In this model, femininity is constructed both as the object of desire and as the guarantor of masculine identity. Her co-edited book, Feminine Sexuality, 1982, with Jacqueline Rose, pushed the idea that gender is formed through fantasy narratives, not anatomy. She also connected her analysis to Levi-Strauss's kinship theory, where the exchange of women in early societies reinforced male alliances, reducing women to objects. Remember? Mitchell equals force structures plus symbolic castration plus gender as fantasy plus Marxist psychoanalytic blend. Let's step into the world of Julia Kristeva, born in 1941 in Bulgaria, later becoming one of France's most influential psychoanalysts, literary theorists, and philosophers. She moves between disciplines effortlessly, from linguistics and semiotics to psychoanalysis, feminism, and cultural theory. Her intellectual influences read like a hall of fame: Roland Barthes, Claude Lévi-Strauss, Jacques Lacan, Michel Foucault, and Mikhail Bakhtin. Kristeva's career unfolds in two major phases: an early structuralist semiotic phase and a later psychoanalytic feminist phase. Her first landmark text, Semiotique, 1969, introduced two concepts that have become her signature: the semiotic and the symbolic. Pause here, this is exam gold. The semiotic is not sociosemiotics. Instead, it's the pre-Oedipal rhythmic bodily dimension of meaning tied to the infant's connection with the maternal body, full of drives, tones, and rhythms. The symbolic is the structured, law-governed realm of language, grammar, and social order ruled by what Lacan calls the law of the father. Kristeva says these two modes aren't separate, they constantly interpenetrate. Every act of communication is a negotiation between the pulsating energy of the semiotic and the rigid framework of the symbolic. This leads us to one of her most important metaphors, Chora. Borrowed from Plato but radically reimagined, Chora is a pre-linguistic space of movement, sound, and desire that precedes identity. You can designate it, regulate it, but never fix it in words. It's where bodily rhythms and drives stir before language captures them. And this chora fuels poetry, art, and moments when language feels alive rather than mechanical. Now, Kristeva doesn't stop at language, she brings the body into theory. Her idea of the speaking body challenges the Cartesian split between mind and body. For her, meaning is not just mental, it is also physical, shaped by breath, rhythm, and sensation. She is also a key figure in intertextuality, a concept she develops from Bakhtin. She argues that no text exists alone. Every text is an intertext, a mosaic of quotations, echoes, and transformations from other texts. Meaning is never original, never fixed, it's always provisional, always shaped by the interplay of discourses. In this way, she deepens Barthes' idea of the text as a tissue of quotations and aligns with Derrida's famous claim that there is nothing outside the text. Her later works explore abjection, how societies and individuals define themselves by casting out what they see as impure, threatening, or disturbing. This is key for understanding how gender and identity are policed through exclusion. In Strangers to Ourselves, Kristeva examines the figure of the stranger both as the foreigner in society and as the sense of strangeness within ourselves. This connects her interest in otherness, identity, and the unsettling spaces between belonging and alienation. Let's boil it down for the exam. Semiotic versus symbolic maternal rhythm versus paternal law. Chora pre-linguistic bodily space of becoming. Speaking body meaning rooted in the physical as much as the mental. Intertextuality, texts as dynamic intersections, not originals. Abjection, defining identity by exclusion. Stranger, the foreigner outside and the alien within. Kristeva's work shatters boundaries between mind and body, language and desire, self and other. She gives us tools to see language not as a fixed structure, but as a living, breathing negotiation between order and disruption. Okay, now meet Sarah Kofman, French philosopher, student of Gilles Deleuze, and one of the sharpest critics of how philosophy and psychoanalysis have imagined woman. Her major work, L'énigme de la femme, 1980, dives deep into Freud's writings on female sexuality. What did she find? That Freud's own theories, while groundbreaking, were full of contradictions and gender bias. He often framed femininity as an enigma, something mysterious and unknowable. Pause here and think, if woman is always the enigma, who gets to do the defining? Exactly male theorists. Kofman's close deconstructive readings showed how both philosophy and psychoanalysis relied on this idea of mystery to keep femininity on the margins instead of letting women define themselves. Remember her four: Freud plus female sexuality plus woman as enigma plus deconstruction of gender bias. Let's meet Catherine Clément, French philosopher, novelist, literary critic, and feminist theorist. She trained under Claude Lévi-Strauss and Jacques Lacan, which means her thinking blends structural anthropology with psychoanalysis. Clément is linked to the French feminist movement and the idea of écriture féminine or feminine writing. She worked closely with Hélène Cixous and Juliet Kristeva, using both theory and fiction to challenge patriarchal myths. Pause for a moment. What does it mean to challenge a myth? For Clément, it's about asking who tells the story and whose voices are missing. She examines global traditions to reveal how women are symbolically represented and often trapped inside cultural narratives. Remember her four: structural anthropology plus psychoanalysis plus écriture féminine plus feminist myth critique. Let's step into one of feminism's most debated concepts. And can you guess what? Yes, postfeminism. Now, despite the post in its name, postfeminism does not simply mean after feminism. It's more like a conversation, a reaction, a rethinking, sometimes even a resistance towards earlier feminist waves, especially the second and third wave. It rose to prominence in the 90s, fueled by mass media, and often framed the feminist theories of the 70s and 82nd as outdated or overly strict. But here's the twist. It's not just about rejecting feminism. It's a critical space where feminism is reassessed, questioned, and reshaped for new cultural and social realities. One of postfeminism's signatures is its challenge to binaries. It resists the idea of a single, universal female experience and instead embraces diversity, complexity, and context. And unlike older feminist frameworks that sometimes distance themselves from femininity, post-feminism says fashion, beauty, romance, even domestic life can be expressions of agency, not necessarily signs of submission to patriarchy. Pause here, this is important for UGC Net. Post-feminism often reimagines the career woman not just as a worker, but as someone empowered through personal success and economic independence, without discarding traditionally feminine traits. Cultural critic Angela McRobbie has been one of the central voices mapping post-feminism in popular culture. Think of characters like Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City, Ally McBeal, or Bridget Jones. These women are independent and sexually liberated, yet still entangled in traditional emotional dependencies and consumer-driven femininity. McRobbie calls this a double entanglement, living with feminist ideals while at the same time undoing them. Post-feminism is also adaptable. It blends into newer feminist spaces like ecofeminism and cyberfeminism, addressing environmental and digital concerns. But here's where controversy comes in. Some use it to suggest that feminism's biggest goals, like gender equality, have already been achieved. Many feminist theorists reject this, calling it a backlash, a subtle depoliticizing of feminism in an age of neoliberal individualism. And while it sometimes critiques earlier feminism, it's not the same as conservative feminism. The difference? Conservative feminism generally rejects liberal and radical feminist ideals outright, while post-feminism works from within feminist discourse as a reflexive critique. Two key texts anchor the post-feminist conversation. Susan Falludi's Backlash, published in 1991. It reveals how media and politics undermine feminist progress by promoting regressive ideals. Christina Hoff Sommers, Who Stole Feminism, which was published in 1994. It claims that modern feminism has strayed from its classical liberal roots and turned hostile to men and tradition. In today's world, post-feminism often overlaps with xenofeminism and fourth-wave feminism, raising fresh questions about intersectionality, digital activism, and the commodification of feminist language. So, in the end, post-feminism isn't an endpoint, it's a contested terrain, a lively dialogue where feminism keeps evolving alongside shifting culture, technology, and lived realities. Meet Susan Faludi, an award-winning feminist, journalist, and author. She's best known for showing how the media twists narratives about women. Her landmark book Backlash, The Undeclared War Against American Women 1991, argued something bold that in the 1980s, the media wrongly blamed feminism for women's struggles instead of pointing to systemic inequality. She called this blaming the victim. Pause here, think about how this still happens today. When women demand equality, are they sometimes told it's feminism that causes problems? Faludi exposed how that story was built not on facts but on fear. Now, connect her name with media criticism plus backlash, 1991, plus blaming the victim concept. Now let's talk about another major post-feminist, Angela McRobbie, a British cultural theorist whose work blends feminism, media studies, and cultural analysis. Influenced by Stuart Hall and the Birmingham School of Cultural Studies, she is known for the term third-person reflexive gaze, where women are both objects and interpreters of media images. Her book, The Aftermath of Feminism, 2008, uses Michel Foucault's ideas to show how neoliberal culture disciplines young women, turning feminist ideals into self-policing tools. Later, in Be Creative, Making a Living in the New Culture Industries, 2016, she explored how precarious work and the Be Your Own Brand culture shape women's lives in the creative industries. Pause here and connect the dots. McRobbie's work isn't just about what media shows, it's about how feminism itself is reshaped inside capitalism. Now, connect her with Third-Person Reflexive Gaze plus The Aftermath of Feminism, 2008 plus Neoliberal Creative Economy. Let's step into the vivid, hybrid world of Donna Haraway, a pioneering feminist theorist and science studies scholar who blends postmodernism, Marxism, feminism, and technoscience into a single, provocative intellectual vision. Haraway is Professor Emerita at the University of California, Santa Cruz in the Departments of History of Consciousness and Feminist Studies. Her international recognition came with a now iconic essay, A Cyborg Manifesto, Science, Technology, and Socialist Feminism in the Late 20th Century, published in 1985. In it, she introduces us to the cyborg, part human, part machine, a metaphor for hybrid identities that refuse to obey old binaries, male and female, nature and culture, human and machine. Haraway rejects nostalgic origin myths like Eden or the idealized nuclear family. Instead, she invites us into a fluid, post-human feminist politics, one that dismantles what she calls the antagonistic dualisms at the heart of Western thought. Pause here, ask yourself, what if identity wasn't fixed, pure, or natural? What if it was messy, hybrid, and strategic? That's exactly Haraway's challenge. Her critique goes beyond gender. Haraway also targets anthropocentrism, the human-centered worldview, and urges us to rethink our relationships with the non-human world. She even prefers the term capitalocene over anthropocene to point directly at capitalism's role in ecological destruction. In 1988, her essay, Situated Knowledges, took aim at the myth of scientific objectivity. She argued for partial, embodied perspectives, knowledge grounded in lived experience rather than a disembodied view from nowhere. Her intellectual range is astonishing, from feminist primatology to post-human ecofeminism, and her influence reaches into human-computer interaction, cultural studies, environmental justice, and new materialist ethics. The cyborg remains her most enduring contribution, a hybrid of machine and organism, unsettling old oppositions like natural and artificial, physical and non-physical. she reminds us that humans have always had an ambivalent love-hate relationship with technology, both dependent on it and wary of it. In A Cyborg Manifesto, she reclaims the cyborg as a feminist symbol of resistance, rejecting essentialist identities and rewriting origin stories. This is the heart of cyborg feminism, a postmodern answer to earlier feminist essentialism. It critiques capitalism's exploitation of women's reproductive and emotional labor while embracing contradictions and multiplicities. For Haraway, the cyborg's power lies in its ability to fuse opposites, machine and flesh, technological and emotional, without seeking purity or coherence. Her work even stretches into primatology and cross-species sociality, rethinking how humans relate to animals and the non-human. Here she calls for an ethics of interdependence, forging relationships across species boundaries. Everywhere in her writing, Haraway resists rigid categories. She invites us to imagine a world beyond binaries, where identities, technologies, and ecologies intermingle to form new, emancipatory possibilities. Link these. A Cyborg Manifesto 1985 plus Situated Knowledges 1988 plus Capitalocene over Anthropocene plus cyborg feminism as postmodern resistance. Picture a feminism that embraces the alien, the artificial, and the engineered. That's xenofeminism. Born from the feminist collective Laboria Cubonics in their manifesto Xenofeminism, A Politics for Alienation, 2015, it challenges the idea that nature should dictate our social order. Its three core pillars are worth locking in. 1. Technomaterialism, using technology and science to dismantle oppression. 2. Anti-naturalism, rejecting the notion that natural means right or unchangeable. And 3. Gender abolitionism, envisioning a future where gender no longer defines social position. Xenofeminists argue we should reprogram society using tools like data, algorithms, and biotechnology, flipping the master's tools into engines of liberation. It's unapologetically inclusive of queer and transgender identities, seeing them as central to dismantling biological essentialism. Pause here and reflect. This isn't identity politics as usual. It's a system-level redesign of how we live, love, and imagine equality in a post-gender future. Remember, Laboria Cubonics plus 2015 Manifesto plus Technomaterialism plus Gender Abolition. Imagine feminism not just marching in the streets, but coding, hacking, and thriving in cyberspace. That's cyberfeminism. Born in the early 1990s, it's both a theory and an activist movement that investigates how gender operates in the age of digital technology, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality. Its intellectual spark came from Donna Haraway's iconic essay, A Cyborg Manifesto, 1985, where she introduced the cyborg, a hybrid of human and machine, as a symbol for dismantling essentialist binaries. Male and female, human and machine, physical and virtual. This figure gave cyberfeminists a powerful metaphor for fluid, hybrid, and subversive identities. Cyberfeminism isn't just theory, it's action. Women and marginalized genders reclaim online spaces, challenge male-coded narratives, and use creative disruption, hacking, remixing, digital art, and open source collaboration as acts of resistance. It also takes aim at pressing issues like surveillance, online representation, embodiment in virtual worlds, and algorithmic bias. Pause here, lock this in. Cyberfeminism has many strands, radical, academic, artistic, political, but all share one vision: to rewrite identity, agency, and solidarity in a machine-mediated world. Remember, Haraway plus 1985, cyborg plus binary breaking plus feminist tech resistance. Picture this: the struggle for women's liberation and the fight to save the planet not as separate battles but as one intertwined resistance. That's the heart of ecofeminism. The term was coined by French writer Françoise Daubonne in Le Féminisme ou la Mort, 1974. Arguing that the same patriarchal systems that oppress women also exploit and degrade the natural world. The solution? An egalitarian, collaborative society where no group, men, humans, or industrial powers dominates others. Ecofeminism branches out in three key directions. Liberal ecofeminism fights for equal rights and inclusion. Spiritual or cultural ecofeminism emphasizes symbolic and sacred ties between women and nature. Materialist or socialist ecofeminism examines the economic and structural roots of ecological and gender oppression. Greta Gard and Laurie Gruen in Ecofeminism Toward Global Justice and Planetary Health outline four core pillars. 1. The mechanistic worldview from the scientific revolution, treating Earth as inert matter. 2. Patriarchal religion enforcing gender hierarchies and rejecting immanent divinity. 3. The power-loaded dualism of self versus other. 4. Capitalism's relentless exploitation of animals, people, and ecosystems. Now link them. Remember Vandana Shiva, Maria Mies, Ariel Saleh, and Mary Mellor as leading materialist ecofeminists. And don't forget the iconic Chipko movement of 1973 in Uttarakhand, India, where women literally hugged trees to stop deforestation, a living embodiment of ecofeminist resistance. So that's all for today. In our next session, we'll dive into queer studies and queer theory, deconstructing sexual and gender norms, exploring how these frameworks challenge and reshape our understanding of identity, sexuality, and power.